Hello friends, I'm Kayla and this is my February wrap up. I actually look forward to filming these now because I've switched up how I'm doing it in 2025. The only reason it's late is because I'm sick, not because I didn't want to film it. I do want to film it because all I'm doing is telling you about the 4 books that I read this month that I haven't already included in vlogs. And then I'm going through my stats, which I love to do. And I'm going to go through my ratings of all of the books that have been in vlogs and just running through those really quickly and putting them into superlative categories. My ears are completely blocked, so I can't tell how loudly I'm speaking. I think this volume's fine. This sounds normal. Okay, stats. Here are the stats. If you want to look around, peruse, you might notice that in the ratings section, I don't have a 5-star. I don't have a 5-star. What the heck? I read 23 books this month and I didn't have a huge win. So that's a little devastating, but my average rating is still a 3.5. That's not great, but it's because I had so many 4s. I had an abundance of 4s, so I'll take it. I also didn't listen to a single audiobook to completion this month. So that's an interesting stat that feels a little bit different. Usually there's a mix of things that I'm physically reading, audio reading, and then I do tandem read quite a few things. This time it was like 2/3 physical reads. A lot of these like didn't have an audiobook, and then 1/3 that I did read tandem. Like there were some good audiobooks in here, but I don't know, I was called to physically reading this month. Another place I have a big goose egg is I guess you won't really notice because the way that it's organized, I only include the genres I did read, not the genres that I didn't. But I didn't read a single mystery or thriller book this month. I read mostly general fiction, followed closely by erotica, and then fantasy, with a couple sci-fi, nonfiction, and horror in there. Another place that's really lacking is where I include, like, if I bought the book in this month, or like in this year, I guess, if I got it from my TBR shelf that I've had around for years and books that are just waiting to be read, or if I got it from the library or if it was sent to me. The smallest one is the books on my own TBR. So good for me. Not whittling down my physical TBR at all, just buying a million things. Great. That feels great. Okay, let's talk about the four books that I read that I haven't talked to you yet about, I guess, unless you watched the live show for Witchcraft for Wayward Girls. But I think having like a 3-minute review here is valuable as well. So where do I want to start? Does it matter? Do I care? Actually, let me tell you the theme. The theme of my reading this month for books that I was just reading on my own time, not specifically for content, though you could argue this one, is none of these were exactly what I was expecting going into them. Not in a good way or a bad way, just in a way. So first up, let's talk about Death of the Author by Nnedi Okorafor, because this is something I was muchly anticipating. And I think that because of my own interpretation of the synopsis, I have also given the wrong interpretation of the synopsis out into the world. So I would like to correct that right now. This sounds to me like a weird book. It sounds like weird fiction. Obviously, you know, going into it, it has sci-fi elements because this author is primarily a science fiction author. And you do know in the synopsis that we're following an author in the story who's writing a science fiction novel. In fact, if you look under the dust jacket, how cool. You get to see Rusted Robots, the story that our main character Zelu is writing. However, this is general fiction. There is excerpts from the science fiction novel in here, but it is that standard like fiction story where we meet a character who is in a transitional period in life. They don't really know where they're going and they find their purpose. So Zelu at the start of this story loses her job and she now has time and the passion and the capability to write this great science fiction novel. She's never been interested in doing that before, but something was pulling her towards it. And what the synopsis says is things like, she does not realize she's about to embark on a life-altering journey. Zelu's novel will change the future not only for humanity, but also for the robots who come next. And it blurs the line between writing and being written. Also, how storytelling shapes the world as we know it. So all of those things can be taken in a fiction sense, just in a real world sense. Like, her writing is going to change her life. Her experience is going to alter, like, you know, putting a novel out into the world can change the world. Engaging with technology in a certain way, things can change. But I took it as, this is a weird ass book and she's gonna write a book and then the book becomes reality. No, it's in an empowerment sense. Things are going to change for her. She is going to change the world. That's true, but not in a weird way. I ended up giving this 4 stars. I thought it was really good. It was really interesting. I just want to make sure it gets into the hands of the right people. The way that the science fiction novel was integrated was smart. I didn't feel super invested in it. It takes a lot for me to care about a story within a story. I like when it's an element, but it has to like have just, you know, it has to have just as good of writing, just as good of characters. It has to be just as strong as the narrative. Otherwise it feels like you're breaking up the narrative for no reason and you're distracting me with something else. But as the story went, the amount that that book came into it was perfect. I think it was really smart how she integrated it, when she integrated it, the amount, and it got more important as the story got on and you got more invested in that story. It still isn't something that I loved enough to give this overall 5 stars, but Zellu's journey in real life was super engaging and interesting. She starts to have the opportunity to use this technology that's being invented for her to have use of her legs again. So since she was a child, she's been paraplegic. There was an accident. She can no longer feel her legs. Because of that and using a wheelchair, her self-image has been really tested. She has been judged by people. And now with this use of these like robotic legs, she's going through things all over again. People are judging her for it. Her self-image is being tested. And one thing I will say is I think I would definitely like to read some reviews. I don't know if there's any out there from people in, you know, who this would be representation for. And I don't want to say anything with certainty about like how I feel like this representation went because I saw some critiques for this author like 5+ years ago regarding another similar story where we had a character who used a wheelchair and then got use of their legs via a magical way. I know that I came across some reviewers who were talking about that, and there were some articles written about it as far as representation and how the author handled things. And because I was aware of that at the time, I also know Nadia Corafor's like story, what might have inspired the characters that she writes. When she was a teenager, she had surgery on her back or spine, and she lost the use of her legs temporarily and was in a wheelchair for a couple months and had to learn to walk again. And what I found especially interesting in here is there's a moment where, as our main character is gaining attention and fame for the book that she wrote, and criticism for the way that people are perceiving her as like maybe wanting to become one of her main characters, the way that she's using these robotics and she's writing science fiction story. There's a moment in like an interview, an interaction where somebody challenges the author and says like, do you feel an obligation to the community that you're representing? But because Zellu herself is a part of that community and she is disabled, I think the dialogue, the commentary that we could have gotten like as readers in that moment is a little bit stalled. And I would have liked maybe that conversation to go a little bit further, or for me to leave the book knowing how Nadia Corafor herself might feel about writing this story. Because obviously as an author writing about an author, you can assume she has put a certain amount of herself and very vulnerable feelings into this book. And I think that that's really beautiful. And I would have liked it to maybe go one step further with the representation conversation. But everything in here was super interesting. Her family dynamics, there's a love story. There's this great journey we watch her go on where she like is following her dreams and really is striving to experience something she's always wanted to experience, and we get to see that. And I just think that this was fantastic. Definitely more for the lit fic readers than I thought it would be going into it. So I want to make sure you guys know if you'll love it or not. Next up, let's switch over to this one. I picked this up because I love Piranesi. This is Susanna Clarke's The Wood at Midwinter, and the cover is so beautiful, and it's clearly a short little novella. I love a short story, and so I just bought it. And if I had flipped through it for even a moment, I would have discovered that half of the story is in pictures, which are beautiful. These illustrations are stunning, and in my opinion, they are the strongest part of this. All of the atmosphere comes from that rather than the writing, and therefore I think the illustrator's name should have been on the cover as well. This is by Victoria Sowden, and it's stunning. It's lovely. However, with the illustrations taking such a bulk of it, this 60-page story becomes a 30-page story, which just isn't enough time to really get across a message. And then the last 10 pages is an afterword from the author. So now the 30-page story is a 20-page story. And coming in at $23, I am therefore paying $1 a page. This page cost me $1 to read. This page cost me $1 to read. Can you really put a dollar value on art? Maybe not. And I did get to experience the beautiful illustrations, but like this story is so not a story. It is an idea. It's a concept. I gave it 2 stars. I think if it was developed into a full novel, it could be interesting. I don't even know how to pitch it to you without spoiling it, so skip over it if you don't want to know. But basically there's a girl and she's wandering through the woods and seeing all of these animals, and then she gives birth to a bear. I was really excited to own this. I thought it was going to be fantastic, and now I'm going to be donating it to someone, and hopefully they can enjoy it more. Okay, moving on to this one. This is I Got Abducted by Aliens and Now I'm Trapped in a Rom-Com by Kimberly Lemming. I've read the I Got Drunk and Saved a Demon series by this author, and I gave both books that I read, I have the third one on my TBR shelf, a 3.75. They were like almost great, like romantasy, quirky, fun romantasy books, but the plot didn't quite go far enough. Like it was focused on the erotic scenes, which totally makes sense with the pitch and the synopsis and the genre designation and whatnot. I just read them when I wanted to read something that was a little more like sexy and fun, and they delivered. And I thought with this one, because it's traditionally published, and I don't know what else made me think, but I thought it was going to be more plot focused. I thought it was going to be a little more traditional. So for those of you who are worried about that element, you love the Kimberly Lemming that you've gotten before, it still is the same. So my expectations are totally not fair. I ended up giving this a 3. I think it was kind of chaotic and messy the first half, because the book wanted to get to like the erotica, and boy did it. Yeah, so we have a main character whose name I can't, oh, Dorothy, because she also has a lion, a pet lion named Toto. There's a dinosaur, and there's aliens. I thought I was maybe getting like something like Ice Planet Barbarians, but with better writing. And maybe actually I did, but definitely more smut than I necessarily wanted. I think those scenes were well written. I also think the book was funny. It succeeded at that. The plot was just kind of a mess. We have Dorothy, and she is, what is she? A wildlife biologist. And she gets abducted. Basically, when humans are in danger, they might die. These aliens like help but kidnap people, and so she ends up being saved by these 2 aliens. There are 2 aliens she is involved with, and there's not much more to say. Plot wise, like that's it. There's just so much chaotic stuff that was actually really hard to follow in the first half, and then it turns into something like sexy and fun, but it just wasn't the balance of everything that I wanted. But still a 3, like an easy 3. Then the final book of the 4, Witchcraft for Wayward Girls by Grady Hendrix. I have read every Grady Hendrix novel. This is definitely in the top couple. I've never given him a 5. I thought this could be it. As far as not what I expected, even though as I learned what this was about and knew it was historical fiction about a home for unwed mothers in the 60s, 70s, I knew it was going to be lower in the horror, lower in the witchcraft, but it still was somehow less than I expected. Obviously, I still had a good time with it. And I think that the threat of danger is like the #1 scary thing in here. There are these girls very young girls who are abandoned by their families. They're like, go give birth. Like, we find out you're pregnant, go give birth in this place. They'll take care of you, do whatever. I don't want to know about it because I'm not willing to teach you, and schools aren't going to teach you, and no one's going to teach you about pregnancy, how you get pregnant, how to even give birth. And even when you go to this house, they're not going to teach you how you give birth. Like, they're not going to tell you anything. It just happens. They take the baby away and then you can come home. So we have our main character, Fern. It doesn't really matter that she's the main character. I don't think Grady Hendrix really shines with characterization, and that's fine for me. They're more vehicles to tell a story and to give a message through. If you need a really character-driven novel, I don't think that his in general will be your favorite things. Maybe I'm wrong. But we have Fern, who arrives at the home and she witnesses other girls like giving birth, leaving to give birth. She's trying to get answers out of them. She makes friends with certain girls, and they're all anticipating this moment where that will happen for them and they can go back home. Some of them feel like close to their babies. They want to keep their babies. Some are in relationships. Some have experienced really horrific trauma. And at one point there is a coven of witches, and there's an interaction with them, and the girls in the house become a coven of their own. And I think there are some really like heavy-handed messages in here that I like, and there are also some more subtle things. And the idea of committing yourself to this magic is something really interesting, because once you promise something, once you give over to this power, you can't just take it back. Not everything is going to be easy to escape, and there is this looming danger constantly. They do witchcraft. They don't really know what they're doing, just like how they got pregnant. They didn't really know what they were doing. And just like having a baby, it's a big commitment. Their magic is a big commitment, and they feel committed to each other. So there is witchcraft for sure. There's scenes of witchcraft. There's scary things that the girls are experiencing. And there is like horrific imagery. There is some disgusting birth scenes. There are some really medical birth scenes. I really respect the way that Grady Hendrix wrote this story. It's not like dude horror, and it's not in a way that feels gratuitous or weird, which I think a lot of horror authors could find themselves writing. But while he stayed really respectful, there is just some like disgusting, like, put the book down. You don't want to read like that birth scene. And I think it's impressive how he told the story. I think because this is so long, it might feel slow for people because it is historical as well. If you don't read a lot of historical books, which I also don't, it might feel that way. I don't know. I was just fully engaged the entire time. I was really interested in every single character's storyline, where it was going to end up, how the book was going to end. There was just enough plot for me, but the distance from the characters and some of the emotions I think we could have felt, that's what left it at a 4 instead of a 5. But I liked it from beginning to end. Like the gothic, I love stories where typically gothic novels have the slow introduction of like how you're getting to the location and everything that you see and you witness, all your senses explored as you entered this house. It had all of that. And then to the literal end, like the epilogue, I didn't even know that I needed, but it was really well done and thoughtful. And I don't know if I'm going to recommend this as broadly as I would other Grady Hendrix, but I had a good time with it. So those are the 4 books that you hadn't yet heard from me about in vlogs. And now I'll go through my ratings of everything else that I read. These are in order of how I enjoyed them. So my favorite book of the month here was Martyr by Kaveh Akbar. This I gave a 4.25. Favorites by Lane Fargo, I gave a 4. A lot of 4s here. The Land of Milk and Honey by C. Pam Zhang. Magnolia Parks, The Long Way Home by Jessa Hastings. Catalina by Carla Cornejo Villavicencio, another 4-star. Another 4-star, The Sword of Kaigan by M.L. Wang. Another 4-star, Sky Daddy by Kate Folk. Sugar by Mia Ballard was a 3.75. These ones were all 3s. Blob by Maggie Sue, Perfume and Pain by Anna Dorn, and The Way Up is Death by Dan Hanks. A 2.75 went to Watermoon by Samantha Soto Yambao, and Fang Fiction by Kate Stamen London. And then I didn't technically rate any of these. So we had Legacy by Uche Blackstock, which is a very good memoir, but I'm not reading memoirs. And then, you know, erotic novels, novellas, short stories, mostly about sentient objects. That's More Like It by Justine F. Oren. The Perfect Poo by M.J. Edwards. Chuck's Living Object Tinglers Volume 2 by Chuck Tingle. Frisky the Snowman by Lauren Beale. And Unhinged by Vera Valentine. Now some quick fun superlatives. Best audiobook is definitely The Favorites by Lane Fargo. This is written like a documentary, so there's a bunch of interviews. There is a traditional narrative, but then there's also a bunch of insertions of articles and people talking about this couple and their ice skating career. Best book, just best book in general, obviously is the one that I rated the highest, Martyr. By Kaveh Akbar. This is like a man who is determined to make his life have some sort of meaning, and so he meets with and interviews and reads articles about various martyrs trying to figure out what his life is going to mean or what his death could potentially mean. It's also a lot about art. Best sequel. Did I read any sequels besides Magnolia Parks? No, I did not. So it's going to be Magnolia Parks The Long Way Home. Obviously this was 4 stars, as was Daisy Hates, book 2. So I feel the same about the sequels. And the original one was like a 4.25. This is just like messy relationships between socialites. But there's a lot of heart to it, I promise. What else is on my list? Biggest surprise. Okay, biggest... I feel like there are quite a few surprising things in here. But if we're saying truly biggest surprise, it's the fact that I read a bunch of these like sentient object romances, erotic books, and this is the one that worked for me, because they don't turn from objects to people, they remain objects. It is a threesome between the ingredients of a s'more. I liked it. Which book will I read more from that author? I mean, there's a bunch of authors here I want to read more from. Kate Folk is someone that comes to mind because I read a short story from this, or a short story collection from this author, and this is her first novel. And I was like, will it translate? Will my enjoyment continue? And yes, indeed it did. So I will keep my eye out for anything she comes out with in the future. Also, I want to read more Jessa Hastings because I want to continue in the series. I've already read Lane Fargo and Nydia Corafor and Grady Hendrix, and I'll continue to read more from them. This probably is my official answer. M.L. Wang has another book, and I was debating if I wanted to read that one first or this one first, because both of these were like so many people's favorites of the past couple years, and I am now going to read this one someday, and I'm really looking forward to it more than I even was before. The book I'll be recommending most is an interesting one. I tend to find myself not recommending books that I love the most, but books that I give a 4 and I could see the potential of people like being obsessed with. Like, I don't think I'm gonna recommend The Favorites and Death of the Author and Witchcraft for Wayward Girls as much as like because I liked them so much I feel like I should, but because of like flaws I see with them or the length of them, knowing that people tend to like things that get like straight to the point, those ones don't necessarily do that. I don't think I'll recommend them as much. Martyr seems like an easy recommend because like so many people love it. I'm glad I agree, but maybe a lesser known one that I will recommend a lot is Legacy. This is a Black physician reckoning with racism in medicine. And I think it would be a good introduction for plenty of people about racism in medicine. And then from here, you can go on to read lots of other texts that give more insight. But also if you like just hearing about a person's life, which I think everybody should engage with, more real life memoirs, less celebrity memoirs. Not that celebrities aren't real people, but favorite character is one that is so difficult, like always, but especially this month. Truly, genuinely, almost all of these characters are intentionally unlikable. And if they're not, they're accidentally unlikable. Like, I just don't pick up books where the people I'm obsessed with, like I love, I'm like, oh my God. Like any one of these pulling down would be inauthentic and it would be wrong. So I'm gonna say the graham cracker and the chocolate bar, because they bring this marshmallow into their life and she has experienced difficult things and they protect her and they love her. And yeah, no favorite people, but favorite food. Final question, most beautiful. Most beautiful cover is Catalina. You can't see it perfectly. Should I just pop up an image? Fine, editing Kayla, sorry you have to do that. I love this green. This green is beautiful. I love the green and gold. I think it's beautiful. I love the sparkly, the star, oh my God, that's beautiful. I like an eyeball cover apparently. Like this one, this is a pretty version of an eyeball cover. The stars, the font, everything about this is perfection. Who designed it? Grace Hahn. Thank you for your service. Oh, but also Water Moon. I think because I didn't love this, it's like coloring my perception, because this is one of the most beautiful covers I've ever seen. And especially when you look underneath, equally beautiful. Inside here, equally beautiful. This is one of the prettiest books I've ever seen, but because I know that I'm going to be parting ways with it at the end of the year and not keeping it because it didn't get a super high rating, maybe I am emotionally distancing myself and pretending I don't love it as much as I do. The jacket was designed by Regina Flath. Illustrations by Haley Morris. So shout out to you. That's everything that I read in February. Thank you so much for listening to me yap. Let me know anything you want to let me know about your reading. I'd love to know every single month like what your favorites were, what your standouts were. And then of course I can live vicariously through you because I didn't have any 5 stars, but I'm hoping, crossing my fingers, that you did. And I want to hear what they were down below. So I will see you tomorrow with my TBR for the season. Bye!